The next component is recommendations. Schools require between 2 and 3 recommendations. Most schools ask for 2. A few schools ask for 3 or allow 3. Don't send in any more than really what is asked for or what is recommended. I used to tell people that each application takes probably about an hour to read, and so if each additional person sends in just 1 recommendation, that goes up from an hour to an hour and 10 minutes, and if you're reading, say, 10 of them a night, that's an additional 100 minutes. It's really not, particularly this time of year, people are so busy, they really don't appreciate the extra recommendations coming in when they're not asked for. But then they may even read the 3rd recommendation. That actually could be your first recommendation you really wanted. It just happened to be 3rd in line. So really be very strategic about sort of those types of things. Just don't lay math on people. Lay really strategy and quality on people. Let's talk about sort of who should write your recommendations. Recommendations should be from people who know you best and who are willing to sort of invest the time and energy in writing a recommendation for you. They're not easy to write. They're very difficult and they're very time-consuming to write. So I really recommend somebody who knows you extremely well and is really sort of willing to invest some time and energy and effort into writing a very strong recommendation. Who is that person? Well, that person is usually someone who you work with. Most schools, if you're not at school for less than 2 years, you're allowed to do one recommendation that's academic. If you've been out of school for more than 2 years, all of your recommendations, unless they specifically say they want an academic recommendation, should be professional. So really follow those guidelines very, very carefully. Who generally writes the best recommendations? Basically people who are 1 or 2 levels above you write your recommendations. Are business schools concerned about titles of people writing your recommendations? No, not necessarily. They would rather have a really insightful recommendation where people really get to know you and get to see different angles of who you are and your candidacy and your potential, rather than someone with a big title who actually doesn't have much time and really writes a paragraph or 2 about you that really doesn't add much insight into them. The purpose of a recommendation is for an independent party to really give their interpretation of you and your abilities and your potential. And so really make sure you choose very, very strategically. Once again, people who know you well are people usually 1 to 2 levels above you in an organization, and those are the people who generally have the time and the energy to actually to invest in something like this. Just a few tips about recommendations. I always recommend that people prepare their recommenders as much as they possibly can. So really, it's very unfair just to say, write a recommendation for me. You may know your life extremely well, but these people have busy lives. They have kids, they have wives, they have problems, they have husbands. And once again, if there's issues you've been working on for a long excuse me, for a long time, they may not remember all the good work that you've done. So what I recommend is really writing like a 1 or 2 page summary, really highlighting your strengths and your weaknesses and your major accomplishments. This will help them an awful lot when they write your recommendation. It gives them a head start and also allows you to control the content of it. So once again, it doesn't take much time, but I think it's really appreciated. And once again, it shows that you want an effort, that you're willing to sort of, you appreciate them, right, spending the time to do this, but you're also going to help them out as much as possible. Another trend we're seeing in business schools is before you get to write 1 general recommendation, it would serve for all schools. Now schools have gotten very particular. They want their own questions answered. They've actually decreased the number of questions on the recommendation form, but they want their specific questions answered. So it makes it harder for the recommenders. And once again, this is all more of who you're going to ask for your recommenders. Make sure they have the time to do this. If you're applying to 6 schools, that's 6 recommendations a person will have to write for you. And most of the schools have different questions they're interested in having answered. So once again, it's a big job. It's a big assignment for people. You're asking somebody for a big favor. So once again, having them help you out, having you help them out with a short summary is going to be very, very helpful. The last thing I really want to warn people about is some people say write your own recommendation and I'll gladly sign it and send it in. That's a big no-no. And I can tell you, after having read about 5,000 applications, I could spot out from a mile away a person who wrote their own recommendation. Your voice comes through in the recommendation, your tone comes through when you're writing, grammatical mistakes come through. So it's very, very obvious. Plus, I've heard some schools now actually have programs. They run the recommendations and the essays through to see if there are any parallel structures and there are any parallelisms between the essays and the recommendations. And if there are, they pretty much disqualify your application from the start. So at all costs, do not write your own recommendation, okay? Please do not write your own recommendation. It's really, you put all this effort into it, really just do a little bit more effort and try to figure out a way to get people to write their own recommendations. Once again, this goes back to the whole point. Help your recommenders as much as possible.